we're going to have a presentation from our town administrator, Evan, and then we will open it up to Q&A. When you do have a question, we're going to ask that everybody line up at the mic and ask it at the mic so that we can keep some order and go from there. So Evan, if you'd like to.
Sure. All right, thank you all for coming. I have a brief presentation. It's only 11 slides, and then we can get into discussion and questions. So just to go back and give a little bit of history, we first started exploring this based on conversations I had with Chief Crapo and then Chief Gauthier. We had attended a presentation in 2011 by the 911 department. Nope, 2011 is a whole decade before that. I was real busy. So 2021, sorry. We went to a meeting that had probably about 10 different communities attend to gauge the interest in forming a regional dispatch center. We then, the select board had voted to sign on to a study that was done by the Collins Center, and that study assessed what benefits and negatives would be brought from a regional dispatch center with the communities that attended. And so the purpose of this meeting is to hear your feedback, but also for the board to start to make its decision on whether or not to join the RECC as we have a timeline that's fast approaching that I'll discuss in a minute. So why are we looking into this? So our radio system is aging. We have a pretty old set of infrastructure here in Grafton. The system is now inadequate in a lot of areas. We have topographical issues and issues with the number of buildings that we have in certain areas, so our radios are not working the way that they're supposed to work. And we have an estimated replacement cost for our system of $3.5 million. It's probably north of that, given some of our surrounding communities have been close to the $5 million mark to replace that, but that's what our local estimate is. As you know, we have a growing population here in Grafton, and given the number of calls that we now have, the chief and I, along with others, have discussed that by 2025 or 2026, we're going to have to start adding a second dispatcher to the call center, and probably starting with the busiest shift and then adding it to the second shift there. That obviously puts us in a position where we want to discuss this and decide what we're going to do before you go out and hire more staff. The next state grant round closes on March 2nd, and that's why we're having this conversation now. The select board would have to decide whether they're going to join into the IMA process so that we can be considered as part of that grant round. So this is the state map as it sits currently of regional dispatch centers. Every one of those colored blocks is a regional center, with the exception of the yellow spot that has Grafton in it. That's what our district would look like. There are currently 26 operating regional dispatch centers in the state of Massachusetts. This is obviously a zoomed in representation of that. You can see that the towns that we're currently in talks with is Hopkinton, Southborough, and Westborough. These are population numbers. I won't go too far into it, but you can see that our total population served by the proposed regional dispatch center would be about 70,000 people. All right, so why are we talking about regional dispatch? So one is cost. So our current dispatch cost as of fiscal year 2022 was $466,483.95. So that's inclusive of salary, benefits, comps, everything else. OPEB, which is other post-employment benefits. We also have capital costs. So we allocated about $250,000 in ARPA funds and $100,000 in a legislative earmark for fire radios. So that $250,000 would go into our current radio system. We have obviously staff, and there are costs and benefits to having your own personnel. There are also indirect costs that are not really easy to tangibly factor. Mainly the cost of staff that it takes to support having personnel, right? More personnel you have, the more personnel you need to manage benefits, retirement, all those other things that go along with it. And then, the economy of scale. So when you have a regional dispatch center, you should have better staffing levels that allow you more flexibility when a community is dealing with a larger scale event. So I calculated out our first 3 years of savings, inclusive of the $3.5 million of the radio system. So our staffing costs, if you factor in the additional staff of fiscal 25 and fiscal 26, we would be not spending 1.8 million-ish, 3.5 million on the radio system upgrade, for a total of 5,360,000. So it's important to note that Grafton's cost is 100% covered by the state of Massachusetts for the first 3 years. And so why do they do that? Because this is the state's initiative to get as many communities into RECs as they can. Their ultimate goal is to abandon the dispatch incentive grant. They've been talking about that for as long as I've been a town administrator. I don't know when they plan to do that. I think that's more of the stick side of the equation than the carrot, honestly. And the other column there that says 420, just to point out, that's an estimated cost of what it would take to add a second dispatcher for 2 shifts. Good. So what are some of the detractions or the downsides for going regional? One, we would lose our local 911 equipment. So what happens is when you go into a regional center, the 911 equipment gets taken back by the state because we don't own that. All of our consoles remain in place, and you can dispatch locally out of your local center after that. Generally what happens is it winds up being a call into the rec from the 911 system and then bounced over to your local. The only times that I've seen that done are for large-scale events, right? So you're having a parade that's going to have 20,000 people, or you're going to have a marathon, right? So you might want to have that routed through your local just so that you can add staff and take that surge. Obviously, we would be losing staff. You'd lose their local knowledge, and we would lose our local positions. You would have some form of dark station, and we haven't determined the set of hours that would happen for, but our current thinking was, somewhere around 16 hours occupied, with the rest unoccupied. So what that looks like is when you go into a dark station, generally speaking, there is a communication device in there of some kind. The one I have most experience with is a communications button. So you walk up, you push the button, and the dispatcher answers. So they're not on the other side of the glass, they're in the little box. So that's obviously something to consider. And we also have to be able to play nice with our neighbors. So that's a lot of times when these things are difficult regionally is when you don't get along with your neighbors. So you have to keep that in mind. So the intermunicipal agreement that we passed out is a ton of legalese, but the salient pieces of it, and again, there's some nuance there, but our discussions all revolve around, we want this to be a standalone district. So under Mass General Law, Chapter 6A, Section 18O, we are able to form a standalone district, which is basically like forming a mini municipality. It becomes its own municipality, it has its own budget, it has its own retirement that it contributes into the Worcester Regional Retirement System, and it becomes standalone. Our governance board is one town, one vote. And that's important because it doesn't matter what your assessment is, it doesn't matter how many people you have. So even the smallest town has a seat at the table as far as making decisions that impact the entire district. There's a finance board that deals with the budget, and there's an operations board. Each town gets 2 seats on the operations board, one for police and one for fire. And so when you're making your standard operating procedures and your dispatch protocols, they're the people that are sitting at that table having those communications and making the decisions. Currently, the site that is the front runner is in Westboro on Otis. We did do a tour of that, I think, last week, and it does have some real potential of being a nice site. And also, like I said, in there, the real impetus for having this conversation now is we have that March 2nd deadline that is looming for application for the grant. All right, and that is it. Tried to keep it as short as possible as far as that goes. But happy to hear any comments or questions that you may have on the matter.
I'm just going to ask everybody to come up to the mic if you have any questions.
Thank you. Good evening, Lisa Kelly, 9 Riverside Road. I'm also the outreach worker at the Grafton Senior Center. In the 14 years I've been there, I've cultivated very good relationships with the chief, the fire department, the dispatchers, and the police officers. And it helps the seniors of Grafton that we have these relationships. And I'm just going to tell you a few stories about how it helps. One night I was home at 7 o'clock. I was in a Zoom meeting. I heard the scanner go off right next to me. I recognized the address, and I recognized the police officer that was responding. I told my Zoom meeting, I'll probably have to mute in a few minutes. My cell phone rang. It was a police officer asking for the code on the lockbox for the key to get in. So not only could I provide that for him, but I also was able to provide a phone call to the daughter, so they didn't have to. That's a great trust working relationship. We have seniors go missing all the time, and what I mean by that is the van will go to their house. They're not there. They don't answer the phone. We don't know where they are. Instead of calling the police for a wellness check, if we don't have family support, I'm able to call the dispatcher and ask, have they been taken to the hospital? Has there been an ambulance code in the last 24 hours? And I'm able to get that answer, saving a lot of time on both sides. I'm able to provide family numbers. If I hear the scanner and I know they're going to a call, I can call up and say, the daughter is the proxy. You can call her here. They have diabetes. The neighbor is responsible for taking care of, but the key is under the mat. So my biggest concern is I'm going to lose that kind of communication that is unable to, at all hours of the night and day, help the seniors of Grafton. So I have talked to the chief and alleviated some of that, but I have to say these dispatchers are incredible. They work so hard. They're so busy. Cindy, I have to say especially, I've really missed her since I've gone to the night. No matter what's happening, if I call down there and ask a question I need to know about a senior, she'll get back to me. So, thank you.
How you doing? Kyle Palmer, 18 Vincent Road. I was just making a couple of notes here while I was listening to this, and you were talking about getting a second dispatcher, and I was wondering if you guys had any statistics over regarding number of calls over time. So like, how has the calls increased? You showed how many calls we have now, but how has that increased over time? Is it doubled, tripled, you know, that sort of thing? One other thing I was thinking about, had you guys thought of any remote opportunities for other candidates? If you need to get another dispatcher, have you thought about maybe not having to pay another dispatcher as much if you could offer a remote opportunity for them, which is an attractive benefit to a lot of people? Let's see. Another thing that I noticed was, according to what this document says right here, is that costs are going to be split equally amongst the towns. And from what I understand, the site that it's not? Okay, well, I was wrong then, but
It's based on population.
based on population, okay. Because the way I see it, Westboro's going to benefit the most from having that location for them. And it's also going to be cleaning up a location that had some contamination, from what I understand.
So it's, it's population and also the number of calls that come from us. Yeah.
Okay, all right, so it's not equal, but they're still going to be benefiting the most by getting some cleanup done at the same time. That's just the way I see it. I also think that local knowledge is hugely important for a dispatch. You know, because people that support the Blue, I don't know if these guys know, well, I'm sure they do. I buy lunch for the Grafton PD every now and again, and I'd actually like to hear what the chiefs have to say and what their input is on this, because I do think local knowledge is huge. And I also think it should go to town meeting, because there was very little information about this. I think people, if they knew what the ramifications would be, would be very interested in voting upon it. So that's just my thoughts. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Carl.
Good evening. Tony Sikora, 3 Green Drive. Chief, I'll let you go first. I know to follow up with what he was asking, because I would like to know also.
Yeah, this was presented by Evan, as he said, in 2021. We looked into it before with Worcester, and I can tell you I was not interested. Tim was here at the time. I was not interested with Worcester for the simple reason we would have been swallowed up, and that's why we didn't go. We wanted the community with Worcester, and talking to the chief and all that. It works, but it's not. I don't think the way it was planned. Actually, we hired a Worcester dispatcher that works for us now. Get to that local knowledge. 3 of the dispatchers don't live in town. They're not from town. So they pick up on it really quickly. The days of saying it's behind, Jerry's barn or the old, this farmhouse or whatever. Nowadays, you have to use addresses. That's going to be the thing. People call in, and they also have cell phones and the hotline phones, which are becoming more and more rare. Around, we have 911, enhanced 911, which will give you locations if we can't get the exact location. It's not perfect. Sometimes it goes onto the cell tower, but I don't think we've had any major issues in pinpointing where an issue is. I would like to say, yeah, let's hire more dispatchers, because we don't need them all the time, but when you need them, especially with the Mass Pike, when there's a fire, when there's a major accident, and you have a limited number of officers on the road, the dispatchers are going all out, and they do a fantastic job. But this kind of solves the issue. I mean, it's a matter, in my opinion, it's a matter of either you do something like this, I hate to give up any control over department members or whatever, but if we do something like this, or the cost for the radio system, which is 17 years old now. We put this in when we built the station. It was a great system. It's still good, but it's beginning to fail. We're going to have to put some major infrastructure repairs. We have to go with fiber. We're on copper lines. We're one of the only departments that have that right now. I've been informed by Verizon that that's going to be gone within the next year or so. So we'd have to put in fiber all across town, especially leading up to our stations. We're probably going to have to go with microwave. That's going to be a very big expense. Like I said, the infrastructure, the radios, both the mobiles and the car radios are going to have to be replaced, because we're all analog, and if you know anything about computers or whatever, analog just doesn't cut it anymore. We'd have to go digital. So there's a very big expense that would have to be incurred. And that's one of the reasons that kind of brought me over to the regionalization.
We still would have to do that, though, if I'm not a computer whiz. If we go regional, we're still going to have those costs to incur.
No, that's going to be paid mostly by the grant. That's why we're putting into the grant to see exactly what would be available. Not all of it, but most of it would be covered in phases.
And
Otherwise, the town pays for it. I don't want to go out on a limb, but the town would have to pay for it. So.
correct, okay, I understand
And you're
that.
talking roughly $3+ million for that. Then to go, once again, with the second dispatchers, and I just want to differ with Evan. I think we need the dispatchers sooner than 2025. I put something in about 4 years ago requesting a step in dispatchers, a night shift for the day shift, and then the overnight shift. And that's going to be more money also. And, if the town wants to do that, then that's fine. But we're also trying to add officers too. That's very important. And once again, just going back to the local knowledge, the people, of the 4 full-time dispatchers we have, 3 of them are from out of town. Okay? And 1 part-time that we have, she's from out of town. So they pick up on it fairly quickly, but like I mentioned, I don't want to mention name, but Joyce, I won't say her last name, she was here when I first came here, and she worked quite a long time, and she picked up on everything, and she knew the old, Jones Homestead and this and that, and the trails and everything. And that's changing. That's changing all over the place. And to tell you the truth, it's very hard to find dispatchers. That's another thing that we have to do, and they deserve it. But there is, they're in a union, so they have to follow union contracts and collective bargaining agreements, but they also need, to make more money, which something like this, I spoke with the fire chief in Westboro and the fire chief and, police chief in Westboro and all that, and the money would be there in a regional to compensate these first, and they are first responders. I think first responders much better than where they are, singly from each community.
Answer your question? Perfect.
Yes, it does, thanks. As far as the local stuff, yeah.
He was the one that asked it, I just said, yeah, to go forward. Thank you.
So coming in a little late on the conversation when I started in July, we did do some tours of dispatch facilities, and the amount of technology upgrades and stuff can help alleviate some of that local knowledge. And like the chief said, most of the people coming in at even police jobs and the other full-time member of the fire department came from out of town. And they learn the local knowledge by being on the desk or being out on the road. So I think that's something that will come. One of the bonuses I see of the regional dispatch in going at it this way is if we can get in on the ground floor while it's being built, and we can have a voice in how it's being built and set up, it'll benefit us, as opposed to if the state eventually comes and says, all right, you have to go regional, we're taking your PSAP, then we have to look to see who will either accept us, and then we have to accept the way they're running their facility already, and we would have no input at that point on how that facility would run.
My other question goes back to the map you showed. Can we bring that up by any chance? I do a lot of driving, I'm retired. I do a lot of driving for night, so I drive from all over the place, all times of day and everything. I'm one of the crazy red guys in the red van or after driving around. I look at this map. Can you focus on our area, please? And what scares me is you look at where we're located and you look at how the valleys and everything run in this area. And I'm sure this would be, for even the fire department and the police department, is all our valleys run up and down. What is that going to do to signals as far as if they're coming from Westboro, that area? I mean, we're off in the corner looking at all this. Has any studies been done on all of this stuff as far as where the equipment's going to be, how it's going to be located, and will they reach in down, into those other areas? Have we looked? Another question is why haven't we looked at Northbridge, Sutton, and Millbury as part of our group? I mean, you look at that little quad, looking at the map, I look at that knowing the streets, roads, and valleys around here. That's more conducive to a group area to where, you look at Hopkinton and Southborough, those are remote corners.
Sure.
As far as for the region.
Yep, so, that's kind of the beauty of building out a network. So what we would be looking at is each community would have multiple towers, which we have now. Our towers are, let's say, inadequate for what we're doing right now.
The way they are.
Yeah, where they are and everything. So generally what happens is each community winds up having microwave that goes back and forth between each tower. So that you can, we were talking about simulcast is what they were talking about?
Yeah, that's part of it.
So, that the valleys don't really play into it. I mean, that's part of the topographic study and the radio network build out to make that happen. I mean, if those challenges exist, then they exist now. It's the same principle. As far as why we're not dealing with Northbridge, Sutton, and Millbury, they weren't interested. So they were all invited to the same 911 conference that we went to. One thing that I've had experience with in the past is the Field of Dreams effect. You build it, they will come. And so you always build a regional center like this with capacity to take on other communities, because once you're up and running and they don't have to do the heavy lift, a lot of communities would just rather come and pay and join up.
And my last comment would be the same as before. I think this should be for 20,000 people in this city, town. What we have sitting here is no representation. I'm gonna say is no representation. I found out about this meeting this morning by a neighbor sending me a text and posting it on our Facebook page for that, you know, hey, anybody interested there? We've got a meeting going on with this. So, yes, I totally agree with going to a.
So it won't go to town meeting. That's not what the Mass General Law directs us to do. So Mass General Law 6A 18O says that it is the vote of the select board or local enabling authority. So whether that's mayor, select board, town council, or city council. That's who's legally obligated to make that decision. As far as this is the third time I've done this presentation. And I've done this these are mostly the same exact slides. I added a couple for this evening, just really so that I'm not bored out of my mind given the same presentation. But this is exactly the same as I've done it twice at the select board meetings. I also have it in my town administrator update that's at the end of almost every select board meeting. And so if I have any updates throughout that process, I've been updating the board on where we are with the IMA pretty consistently through most of 2022.
I won't argue with that, but for the average Joe in this town who doesn't get on Facebook, doesn't get on the town website, and doesn't look at this stuff, this comes up as pops as new. And this is what causes a lot of the disgruntledness with a lot of the people of things coming up and going through the Board of Select. Yes, you have the right, we elected you to sit here and make the decisions, but, you know, most of us, we see our tax bills going like this. Yes, we know everything is going up. And then something like this, eventually, you know, it's all cost. It's not free.
Right.
Somewhere it's getting paid for, somewhere we're all gonna pay for it.
Yep.
That's why I gotta agree with, you know, something
Right, so
more
I just
in depth to
want-
more
hold on
of the
one
people.
So if you're worried about your taxes and who's got to pay for it, we just showed you $5 million over 3 years. That's your
And
savings.
we all look at, okay, and I know a lot of people I talk to, and I do talk to a lot of them now that I drive, didn't before when I was a manager of a plastics company. We look at what this town has gotten in the past 15 years. No offense, guys. Fire department, police department, school, this building.
Mhm.
And a lot of them, public works building.
Yep.
That's a lot of money that, yeah, we pay for it. You guys pay for it. You live here too. So there's communication. And for a lot of people I know a lot of people that I called, first found out about it, they were asking me what was that all about.
Okay.
So it's just more forthcoming with information, because this is a surprise to me.
So one thing we could do, just an idea, is to actually just have him post all the select board meetings with this on our agenda, and if people, because we did have conversation as a board.
Right.
We had some earlier conversations which would have gotten us to where we are today. I would encourage us to just put together a pack and basically watch these meetings if you're interested in this topic. And you can go back and you can see every single conversation, every word that has been uttered on this topic, because we post them all on our agendas. They're all on video that you can just go and watch, to go back and see the entire history of how this has gone on. I think we should do that.
That's fine, just something, because it's gonna come up, you know, here's another thing that got pushed through.
But
Without people-
that's an unfair characterization.
I know it is, but it's,
So
But
we're,
you can
you know,
correct that. when people
I
say
get
that.
on the website and look at it, I don't really look at it that much, I look at it more for the building department and stuff, because I was involved in the Snow Road fiasco that went on there. So,
So
but.
we're
No,
not
we're
here
good.
to argue at
No,
all.
no.
The whole point of this is for us to hear.
I'm not trying to.
I'm not trying to either. I'm just, the whole point of this is that we do see this as a really important decision for the town. That's why we put this together. And, you know, a successful meeting from my standpoint is that we've clearly heard input from residents and are gonna address that going forward. That's the point of it. It's difficult to communicate to the right people for every meeting that we have, with every potential topic that they might be interested. It's just difficult.
I agree.
But we definitely can put a package out to say, here's the meetings you should pay attention to, and just go watch them. And by all means, we have a facility for just emailing the select board, so if you have additional specific concerns about this, fire them off, and we'll try to answer them in upcoming meetings. We haven't made any decisions yet, that's why the timing of this is before we've signed anything, but we have to make decisions soon, and that's why we're soliciting public input.
Thank you.
Can I hop in quick? I might have missed this quickly, but as we're talking about regions, I think it was an important clarification that we had in earlier meetings that this doesn't impact any of our current mutual aid contracts or anything like that, that we're any of our emergency services are currently coordinating with surrounding towns. It's just dispatch.
Hello,
Hello.
Dennis Parent,
Dennis?
Milbury Street. Could you just go back to the savings slide?
Sure.
Okay, so salaries and benefits, you say we're gonna save, what's the savings there?
$1.8 million over 3 years.
Okay. Don't we still have to pay the salaries of the dispatchers that they have in the center?
Not for the first 3 years, that's what I was saying.
How about after?
So after that, it's an
3 years expires after 3 years, so.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Thank God
So-
you're here.
Yeah, I know it. That's why I
so-
came.
Yeah, I know. So, yeah, after year 3, you pay your assessment.
Okay. And is that gonna be 1.4 million?
No, it's
Because we'll be
likely-
paying for extra dispatches, right?
Yeah, what would state subsidization, right? So,
Yeah.
our current estimate is that it would be around 350,000 annually.
350,000 annually? Okay. Got it. All right. The other question I have is, have you made cost estimates of what it's gonna cost to put the administrative people in the station 16 hours a day?
Chief, I know we talked about it, but I don't know that we have.
No, we didn't really, we didn't determine nights, because if you're talking nights, you're talking shift differential and all.
We really haven't even determined how many hours, and the chief has his opinion, and I think we'd obviously go with what his opinion is.
Yeah. But there is a cost there?
Yeah.
Okay. And then also, how about when the police department has prisoners?
Yep.
Which sometimes can be for 3 or 4 days straight,
Mhm.
24 hours a day.
Yep.
Who are we gonna pay to watch those people?
Right. Chief, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, as you're aware, we just entered an agreement with Worcester County Sheriffs. So anybody that we have overnight, that's more than one night. As I was saying, Mike, we entered an agreement for overnight lockups with Worcester County Sheriffs, as did several departments. And if we have a prisoner that doesn't make bail, it's on a warrant, whatever, we will bring them to the Worcester County Sheriffs. And what's nice is they take care of them. They will bring that person to the hospital if need be. They'll also bring that person to court the next morning. The initial cost for that is basically to make sure we have a 2-man unit do the transport. And if, I said hospital, but unfortunately, if the person is really bad, in our MOU, memorandum of understanding, if that person is really bad, has to go to the hospital, we have to take the prisoner back, got him at the hospital. Once they're released, we can bring them back to Worcester County Health Correction. But that's it.
If there's room.
If there's room. We haven't had any issues yet. And the only thing is, if
Maybe
we have a
we did
female,
one time.
if we have a female, then we have to have a matron come in,
Okay.
which in a lot of cases, we do.
But there is cost involved.
Yes.
And also, we have to still maintain the police station, right? So there's a lot of maintenance costs at the police department that we still have to have for cost.
That doesn't change.
No, but we have added costs to maintain the rec center.
As part of, but the assessment is the assessment.
So you're saying it's only gonna be would you say 350,000 a year
That's the
total?
Yeah,
For
that's why,
everything.
that's why you do
Maintenance,
it.
lights, everything at the rec center?
Yes, because the state takes the rest of that cost and funds it through the dispatch grant.
Okay, for 3 years,
Nope.
forever,
After 3, so we do 3 years, they cover our entire assessment.
cost, yeah.
The 4th year, they cover 75%, or I might have said that backwards. They cover 25%, we pay 75%. And then every year thereafter, we pay our assessment, and then the delta is paid by the state of Massachusetts.
Okay, so there is a definite cost savings,
Yeah.
yeah.
Especially when you factor in, so Dennis, the rub is, it's not a great cost savings at one dispatcher per shift. But when you go to 2 dispatchers per shift, it becomes
That's where the
a
cost,
cost.
and I agree with the chief, we need to.
I agree with both of you.
So, I just wanted to get out the fact that there is still cost
Oh, yeah.
involved, but you say that the costs are gonna be minimal.
They're, I wouldn't say minimal, I think they're
Well,
still.
not minimal.
No, they're still,
Given the entire budget, it
exactly.
sounds minimal, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the greater benefits budget-wise is that the number is the number, right?
Yeah.
So the number state, they say your assessment's 350, they say your assessment's 370, doesn't matter, pick your number. That's what your assessment is. And then the state's on the hook for the rest.
I understand, okay. All right, well, thank you, that was very informative, thank you.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thanks, Dennis.
Sheila, ask a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, no, go ahead, if
Okay.
you want to talk.
All right, Wendy Allen, 8 Lane. So the dark station kind of concerns me because we don't have like a fire station in town with staff or somewhere to go for emergencies. How often do people come into the police station, like physically come in for something?
Oh, did you want this? You should just say, hey, Ray, I need the mic.
People believe that I get the mic and you don't.
I know.
Yeah, we do have people that come in to make complaints, file complaints, or a lot of license to carry applications. Well, on the overnights, it's hard to say, on the overnights what happens. I'm talking about after 11 o'clock at night, because that would be the time that the station would be dark. But the thing is too, Evan didn't mention dark station, and I know there's concern, and I was concerned about this too, and I've talked to chiefs that are part of a regional dispatch. People would come to the station, we'd have a camera, we'd have a video monitor there. What's the issue? If they need to get into the station for some reason, and follow or whatever, they'll be buzzed in. The doors will be locked, but we have electronic locks that, we utilize, as a matter of fact, during COVID. So we screened people before they actually came into the station. And then they could buzz and it'll be remote, a better system than what we had. I mean, ours is good, but it was installed 17 years ago. So they would be buzzed in so they'd be safe in the lobby. And at the same time, dispatcher would contact an officer to come in. If it's something that an officer needs to handle, the officer will come in, providing they're free, naturally. I can't say they're gonna be there within 30 seconds, nobody can make that claim. But if it's something they have to do, we'll have a bank of forms. A lot of times it's just to make out a complaint, which, can be done online. We will enhance our complaint-making abilities online with forms, and they can just do that, and a lot of people like to do that. They don't like to come to the station. Plus, you get some people who like to come to the station all the time, It's just like some people that love to call the ambulance for the most trivial thing, which ties up our ambulance, But, and that's the situation there. So it's not perfect, but once again, there's alternatives there that we have to look at, and do we want to, front everything? And my biggest concern is the radio infrastructure, that we need to do something, because it's got to be changed. It's got to be changed. And just another thing, and I don't want to speak for the fire department, but
But you got it, right?
try to take this try to take this away from you, but no, and fire or police, with a regional dispatch, as Evan said, and even the chief said, when you have, and Dennis is a dispatcher, when Dennis, I'm sorry, Dennis, when we get a call, okay, say a mass pike call or a fire call or whatever, and you can attest to that, that's when the dispatcher goes crazy, because they're by themselves. Especially if we have an emergency medical dispatch situation, because the law says if somebody calls up, asks for an ambulance, and the dispatcher has to give pre-arrival instructions. Technically, they're not supposed to do anything else but handle that call. So when other calls are coming in, all right, by rights, the dispatcher is not supposed to take anything else. Of course, we do, and it's done all over, because it just, when it gets busy, it gets busy. But an accident call or whatever, you have 9, maybe 10 other dispatchers in the room, which can take over for that, which is actually safer, you know? And especially in a fire situation. Now, when you're doing mutual aid, now you've got the Westboro, you got dispatchers there, and a lot of times especially for the mass pike calls, they dispatch Westboro, close out. And, or, some of the other departments. I know we don't deal a lot with Hopkinton, we don't deal a lot with Southborough. But as Evan mentioned, and I'm really flying off here, as Evan mentioned, I've spoken to the other chiefs in Blackstone Valley, and there was no immediate interest right now. But as it comes, once they see what's going on, I think, if everything goes right, they're going to say, hey, you know what, this is a great idea, and they're going to climb on board, which will help us with mutual aid for our other contiguous communities. So.
Thanks, Wendy.
Is there something you want to say? No?
I think you covered it.
Hi, Nancy Piccone, 3 High Point Drive. I just have a couple questions for the money thing. Can you put the money thing back on?
This money thing?
This money thing. Thank you so much. So after 2026,
Yep.
what would our cost be?
So,
I know it's divided by the 4, but I did notice that we have a similar population of Westboro, but they have twice as many EMS calls. So is that a factor in the cost?
yeah, it is.
Okay.
It is, so it's 50%, it's done by, it's an equation of your population and your call volume,
Okay.
right?
That's
So
good.
you have more calls, you
Population.
you pay more money.
Yeah.
That's essentially how that works. Sorry, the first part of the question?
Did they figure that out in advance? Like, so do
So
you know what the
we-
estimated cost would be compared
Yes.
to our current?
So our estimated cost is around $350,000
Okay,
in perpetuity. However,
but it's gonna change based on numbers.
right, and there's a caveat to that, right? So somebody joins the rec, that might decrease our assessment.
Okay.
Somebody leaves the rec, that might increase our.
That was my next
Right,
question.
exactly. So it's all proportional.
If one of the other towns pulls out,
Yep.
I actually watched or read an article yesterday. Hopkinton had a meeting, I think yesterday,
Yeah.
about this, and they said there's total savings after the initial period would only be like 120,000 per year
Yep.
for them.
So Hopkinton already has 2 dispatchers per shift.
Right, so that's what we're lacking. I mean, I can tell, I listen to the scanner 24 hours a day. I know we need more dispatchers, for sure.
If
If I
the
may
other
just
thing is,
on that, if I could just follow
it's
up.
like a
You-
5-year exit.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Hopkinton also has 29 police officers.
right.
Compared to us, and we're.
And per shift, how many do they have?
And much busier,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
We're much busier than there.
Hopkinton and Westboro are also much busier than Grafton and Southborough. I mean, I have a good friend of mine is a select board on the Southborough, she's actually the chair. So we just had a little chat before. It works out really good for Southborough.
Amy?
No, Lisa Brascio.
Okay.
Yeah, it works out really good for Southborough, but I'm just wondering is if it works as good for Grafton. And my only other concern is, after reading about this Superfund cleanup site in
Yeah.
Westboro where they plan to put this dispatch center,
Yeah.
you toured it. I
I
did,
did.
obviously
Yeah.
not privy to the tour. I did read multiple
I can-
articles about the condition of the building. Do you feel like the building is safe?
Yeah, I can go into that. So we did, I don't remember what day it was, they're all blending together, but we did a tour. And so the company was a company that dealt with lumber and the treatment of lumber, mostly based in creosote, so like you see on a telephone pole. So there are 2 sites on the proper site, the whole site, that have basically landfills, right? They dug holes, they lined them, they put the creosote in there, and they capped them. Those areas cannot be touched. The bulk of the contamination, as I understand it, and what I was reading on the EPA's website, was actually in the pond that's immediately behind there. And they've done a ton of cleanup work in that pond. The building itself sits in front of where that contaminated area is. And it's a Butler building, which is just I-beam construction with metal sides. It's not in horrible shape, it's dry in there. But they would have to reskin the whole building. They'd have to rip out the concrete pad, re-pour a pad, and then configure it for however they decide to configure it as a dispatch center. There's also 2 areas of concrete. If you were facing the building to the right, those would be eliminated, a new pad poured, and then that's where the tower would be.
And that's what they told you when you toured it
Yes.
recently? Okay, because it's different than what is in the Metro West Daily News
Yeah.
article about the Westboro site. They said that
Yeah.
very little refurbishment was going to be done.
No, it's going to be.
Yeah, I guess
pretty
Superfund cleanup site, the words just scare me. I'm from Ashland originally, and we have one of the biggest Superfund cleanup sites, and everything in the general vicinity was just wiped out.
Right.
So the fact that there's a building that's standing that's been near this pond and, ground contamination, I mean, unfortunately, I know way too much about that, so I was just
Yeah.
worried. And I only have one last question, I'm
Sure.
sorry, is our current dispatchers.
Yes.
Hopkinton mentioned this in their meeting, that there's no guarantee that we keep the current dispatchers, that they go back into a pool and have to reapply for their jobs.
Right, so, for those of you that don't know the community I came from, we also regionalized. So we went through this entire process, and how it works is that you're guaranteed a interview, you're not guaranteed a position. However, the dispatchers that we have that are valuable, hardworking,
Yeah, I
good
mean, I know
dispatchers-
some of them aren't from town, but they're very aware of
Yeah, right.
what's going on in
So,
town. and-
so the chief's gonna make a recommendation, obviously, he's gonna be part of that hiring process. And, you're gonna bring the people with you that are talented, good,
Right.
hardworking, know what they're doing, you're gonna bring those over. You're also never gonna put in a contract that you're going to hire everyone.
Right.
Because here's what happens. 3 weeks before you go over, someone files a sexual harassment claim, you don't wanna move that person, right? I mean, there's all these things that happen, so you can't legally put in the document, everybody gets a job. But I will say that the dispatchers with good records that knew what they were doing, that wanted a job, got a job when we did this before.
Okay, and just because you said you have experience with the regional, how does it work when towns have different rules, like, or bylaws, or police practices, or
Absolutely.
methods of operation? How do the dispatchers know that we don't have a sound, what the heck is that word? The noise.
Siren?
The noise ordinance.
Ordinance. So-
We don't have a noise ordinance, but
Right.
maybe, the next town over has a.
Right, so in my experience, what happened is you wind up, each town gets their own set of standard operating procedures, but they blend a lot of them.
I'm sure there's a lot of overlap.
So
but
there'll be SOPs for, your noise ordinance. They're basically cheat sheets, right, that you can just flip. They kind of look like, if you go in, there's an EMD, a lot of them have this, like, card deck that you flip up if it's a heart attack, or it's a this, or it's a that. So they kind of look like that, and they'll give you, that base information for each community. Then a lot of the protocols wind up getting meshed into one. And so what happens is the chiefs, through their operations meetings, they decide, okay, your police station isn't going to be central anymore, it's going to be called station, or it's going to be called.
Right, because they all use different
Yep, absolutely,
terminology
yep.
too, so.
So what wound up happening in the last one I was part of is we adopted a lot of the state police numbering system and some of their terminology, because that was most palatable for the different communities.
Right, yeah, because even some of the codes and
Yep.
stuff are different.
Yeah, exactly. Like here, they don't use a lot of codes on the radio.
You want to take that?
What?
Well, no, we use the language.
Right.
Right.
And which is the easiest to adapt to. I came from Rhode Island. All right.
You're kidding. You
This makes you feel better.
You came from Rhode Island, I couldn't tell that by your accent.
Oh, Oh, well, then first you called me a politician, and then you say,
No, that was the last meeting.
I would never accuse
but-
you of being a politician.
No, I'm a diplomat, I'm
He's
not a
good.
politician. I was highly insulted by that.
I can tell.
You didn't get a Christmas card.
I know it.
But, no, you know, I'm used to, where I come from, we use 10 codes exclusively. I'm sure, and out there in Scandaland, they hear that. After 9/11, a lot of the codes, they said, you know, the Department of Justice and surveys and Homeland Security said, use natural language, because naturally, not everybody uses 10 codes. I still know the 10 codes. I haven't been there in 18 years.
I know the 10
You know.
codes from my CB radio
Yeah,
days.
yeah, and, you know, and it's a lot easier because, you know, transmissions are a lot briefer and all that, but we use, you know, we don't even use 10-4, which I know the fire department does, but we don't even do that to say, okay.
Well, I noticed a lot on the
So-
scanner, listening, is, we use codes or certain situations come up, like literally right before I left, there was a mental health call. Like, and then they went to the private, or to the cell phones or something, off the radio for the rest of the call.
We don't do that.
Oh, no, you do.
We used
You
to
do
have-
all the time. There's
What's that?
frequently calls that come in over the radio and then the rest of the conversation diverts to a cell phone or something.
Oh, well, yeah, or we have messaging.
Does that work regionally?
I don't know what the other departments do, but the thing about the other department, well, let's go back to
Oh, go ahead.
you know, like the noise ordinance or whatever. The dispatcher should, you know, we'll get an inkling to find out, but you want to talk to a police officer when it comes to something like that. You know, this doesn't change the police department.
Right.
This changes just the call-ins and the infrastructure for the radios, for the better, for the radios anyways, and all. But this doesn't change anything for the police officer. The police officer is still going to respond, they're going to answer your questions, and if you have a question that you don't require police response, then they'll get the number, and then the police officer will call you back. If some people don't want a police officer going to their house, you know, they want to see a cruiser in the neighborhood or whatever for their particular problem right now. You know, everybody likes to see a cruiser in the neighborhood, but not stopping in front of the house, going in, and then all the neighbors, especially now with social media, what are they doing there? You know, what's going on? Everybody speculates. So the police are still going to be there, and, you know, any questions of law, you know, law or criminal procedure or whatever will be answered by them, not the dispatchers. The dispatchers aren't supposed to
Right,
be
so the
answering
dispatcher's just gonna,
Right. Yeah, they will take your calls, get all the pertinent information, and if it's an ambulance call, they will do emergency medical dispatch, pre-arrival instruction before the police, you know, get there, or the ambulance get there, and same thing, all the information is taken down, and it's relayed to the police officers or to the fire department in town, period. Nothing changes there.
okay. Okay, and I guess I just thought of one last question. You said that the dispatch equipment would have to be given back to the state,
So
because they own it?
yeah, so and I'll do it in layman's terms because I don't really know all of it. So, you know, every dispatch center, usually in their data closet, has a 911 tower, right? It's got all the 911 junk in it. That's what the state owns, comes in on fiber, goes into that thing, goes out to our consoles. That's the piece they take. So in the community I came from, when you call 911, it goes to Chicopee, Massachusetts. But if we're having a special event, they'll either put it in, it's IMC out there. I don't know if we're all IMC here.
Yeah.
IMC's a software. They put it in there, and then the local dispatches takes over from there.
Okay, so there's no chance of getting like our equipment upgraded here by some kind of a grant or something to be able to do dispatch?
No, we have
Stay local.
we have one terminal that needs to be upgraded now. That's about 100, what do we think, 135,000 was the estimate? So,
And that's just a-
Yeah, I mean, I know the radios, I mean,
Yeah.
the radios are obviously a problem, you can hear it.
yeah, so we, you know, we would probably not upgrade any of that. You would just want to keep it, if the department, and this is the chief's purview, obviously, decides to keep it at all, you would want to keep it operational enough that if you had a local event that you wanted to take over yourself,
Yeah,
you could.
like Hopkinton and the Marathon kind of thing.
Right, right, and that's going to be a whole, they set up their own
Will
command
our-
post and their whole thing.
Will our officers' radios that are currently some working poorly, will that be upgraded in this
Yep,
whole
so,
system?
yeah, that's what we
So we have
were,
a lot of listening.
one of the things that really benefited us in the other community is that the rec winds up owning the computers that are in the cars, all the radios that are in the fire trucks, the portables, all of that stuff.
So all of that gets upgraded
Right.
to go along with
Yep,
the regional
yep.
dispatch?
And so what winds up happening that's cool about it, and this is the part I like the most because I have to deal with the staffing side of it, is when the MDT, mobile data terminal that's in a car, that's the computer that's in the car, it dies. Drive to the regional, you give them one, they give you the other one, and you're back on.
Yeah, that
Same thing with
doesn't
radios.
seem like
That
it.
was one of the larger benefits. And
So
being
all
around-
of our systems get an upgrade from this?
Yeah, and I mean, again, just to be realistic with everybody, it's not a switch, right? So you probably don't get everything on day one.
Just like the website.
Right, exactly. So they will,
Sorry.
easy buddy.
Yeah.
Sorry, Laura. We're still having real meeting problems with that, but
So the, I don't know, I got distracted by,
I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm good anyway.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
okay.
Appreciate it.
Go ahead, Ray.
Hello, Jim Davidson, 391 Providence Road. Just a few quick questions for you. So you mentioned that there were some other towns that were invited into this program. Which towns are those?
Can you pull up the map, just so I can refresh myself? So, originally, we were talking to Northborough, Marlborough, Hudson, and Sudbury? Shrewsbury, sorry. And it seems like the city of Marlborough was looking to get a building redone as part of the rec, and when it seemed like it wasn't gonna end up there, they stopped being interested. That's just my speculation. Shrewsbury just put a ton of money into their own radio system, so they're unlikely to spend that money and then come over. I mean, that looks very wasteful. So I would think that that has the underpinnings, and I don't know about the other two communities, what their underlying ideas were.
Okay. And then the other question would be, could you speak to the service time? So obviously Westboro is further away than Grafton, so would that mean that the average time to respond to a call would
We're
be
not
any
responding
different?
from Westboro, we're still in Grafton, the
Right,
officer.
so-
okay, yeah, so.
So, yeah, right, so the police department remains unchanged, right? All your people are in Grafton, and it's the difference in time from the radio coming from, Westboro to Grafton, which is nothing, right? It's not, right, it's not something that you're gonna be able to perceive in any way.
And then the other question regarding the cost, so I think you had mentioned that part of the benefit was getting the grant that would be involved in that. And I guess my question would be, like, if you were to look at that financial projection without the grants, because I think sometimes the grants can kind of make things a little bit messy. I mean, it is a benefit that we get in some ways. We are paying taxes to the state too,
Oh, yeah,
so it's
still
kind of
your
like
money.
one pocket
Yep,
into the
still all of
other.
our money, yeah.
So
no doubt.
my question would be, like, if there were no grants, I guess would this still make sense from a financial perspective?
No, probably not. But here's the thing with 911 grant that's different than with the other grants, because this is one of the great things about government, or Massachusetts specifically, is they give you a grant, and then they take the grant away, and now you have all the stuff and no grant to fund it with, right? 911 is different, because 911 is assessed on your cell phone bill, on your landline bill, so there's a built-in revenue stream for that. Does that mean that they never change their program ever? I couldn't tell you. You could get 3 governors from now does something different. But that can almost impact any part of what we're doing, our unrestricted aid, our Chapter 70, right? There's all these other things that play into it. So of all the things that I've looked at, this seems to be the most stable because it has a built-in revenue source that's not really something that people can get at for something else, right? It's not the rainy day fund. It's not, I'm going to divert this to my pet project. 911, it's got a specific mandate in the statute, and that's how they get their money.
Got it. And then the last question is just to walk through the decision process of this. So I think you had mentioned the grant expires in March, so it sounds like the select board will make a decision either tonight or at some time before March to move forward.
Yep. Yeah, so I think that the board is going to have this on their February 7th agenda. Whether they vote it that night or not is obviously up to the board. And they'll make that decision when they're in session on that day, I would think, or the 14th. Because what we really need to do is be able to give our partners notification that yes, we're in, or no, we're not, And that's going to alter that grant. So the deadline to apply for this grant round is March 2nd.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Colleen?
Yeah.
So I've been the lone dissenter on this board with this subject. And the reason that I've been against it is because there were a lot of questions. One, what happens with the dispatchers? I don't want anybody to lose their job. I want them to be able to, apply for another job and get another job. A dock station. I'm not crazy about a dock station. But there's been discussion recently about resolving that situation. I've seen dispatch in this town go from, and Dennis knows this, a woman named Eileen Gately, who dispatched the police and fire out of her house 24 hours a day. And that was, when I got on the department in 70. And she did the police, I think, until 72. Then she did police and fire until 72, and then she did fire for another 10 years. Out of her house 24 hours a day. So now we've gone from that to this regional dispatch. And one of the things that I asked the chief over here at the last meeting was, I need to know from both of you, yes or no. And what I heard tonight was yes. And one of the things that this savings is going to bring us, and one of the goals of this board, is to increase the police department. And we have, in the last 2 to 3 years, we've put more officers on. But we're still not at a level of a 20,000, population town. This additional money that we're going to save from doing this is going to allow us the leeway to hire more police officers. And that's a really good thing. Are we losing the local, where's Dolliver Hill, okay? Eileen Gately knew where Dolliver Hill was. I know where it is, nobody else does.
I do.
But, yeah, he does. But we're going to have an efficient system, and it's going to be really, really good for this town, and it's going to benefit us in ways that no one will ever see. One, by bringing more police officers onto our department, and also giving us the radios and the system to be able to protect us and them. And for that, I'm in favor of this.
A couple questions that I've heard that I think have kind of been answered, but as a standalone district, the district is the one that hires the dispatchers, right? So there isn't an overall board that says, oh, well, we like your dispatcher, they're really good, we're gonna take them for another center. They're employed, working at that center.
So, I will never guarantee what political people will do. However, the oversight board in this case is the 4 town managers and administrators of each community. They are going to take their cues from the operations board, which is the police chiefs and the fire chiefs. So I don't see that playing out. I didn't see it play out in the last one I was a part of.
I think there's no overall, it's not like hiring decisions have to go through another higher level of the board or anything like that. You work for the district.
Right, so, exactly. Yep, they're all hired by the district. So the district would have an executive director. They're the ones that are going to manage the day-to-day operations of the facility and their staffing and all the rest of it. So my hope is that if we go this direction, that, we create an environment where the executive director gets to run their department. I think that's the most effective way and the most efficient way. But I think at the outset, that's when the chiefs are going to have the largest sway in saying, these are my people, and I'd like them to go.
Is there an estimate as to the staffing level at the center?
So we've had a lot of conversation about that. There's some language in here that says it won't be less than the cumulative total of what the communities have currently. My personal perspective on this, and I've been pushing this in our meetings, is that I really don't want to pigeonhole the executive director. Like and the reason for that is that you can't foresee what's going to happen 3 years from now, 4 years from now. Advances in technology, changes that happen. I don't think we're going to wind up with less people than we have now. I think it's going to be the opposite. But I also don't know that the IMA is the correct place to fully determine staffing. I think that that's probably more a district policy, a rec policy or a standard operating procedure, however you want to put it.
Okay. I guess my last question is, we're talking about the dark station. Is that referring just to the lobby, or are we saying that there won't be anybody in the building at all? Will there be like officers in there overnight usually, or are they generally out on patrol or whatever?
Well, they have to come in to do reports and whatnot, but if it's a situation at night, chances are the officers will be on the road.
Okay.
And if there's something, the building is secure, we have cameras all around. As a matter of fact, they would probably also include we're set to get new exterior cameras, but that would be efficient so that our MBTs in the cruisers they could click on to the front of the station, the lobby, or whatever, or on the exterior of the building, so that they can keep an eye on the building also while they're on patrol. With digital, right now we have analog cameras outside, but the original cameras going on 17 years old, which is unheard of. A lot of departments are like that, they can actually watch the prisoners from their MDTs in the cruiser. We'll always have if we have a prisoner and they're not being transported to House of Corrections, then they could also, the officer in charge could actually watch on his MDT with the cells and see what's going on, inside the building.
Thank you, that's all. I was sure whether there was normally people in there overnight other than the dispatchers.
Well, right now we have dispatchers, but we don't have clerical staff.
All right, thank you.
I just wanted to take a second, go ahead.
My question will probably be brief. Nancy Cherian, Maroney Road. And I wanted to address my question to the fire chief. My house had a fire 25 years ago, and within a mile of my house, there's been 2 other fires in those short time period. So I want to know who's going to do the backup for Grafton if Grafton needs assistance for a fire.
That's going to stay the same as it is now. We have what we call run cards, or a series of numbers and towns that we call when we need mutual aid help. And all of that is going to stay the same. So in your area, the next people there would be Upton,
Okay.
no matter what. And then
My driveway's in Upton, so when I had my fire, I had Grafton and Upton come up. You did an amazing
we
job.
may fight at the end of the driveway to get up there first, but our procedures are all going to stay the same.
It was amazing. They did an amazing job. So, okay, thank you.
So I just wanted to share with everybody the amount of time that I've personally spent researching and looking into this to get to the decision I reached, which was I've toured a rec center with some of the board members and the fire chief. I've toured our Grafton Dispatch Center. I watched the 2+ hours of the Southborough Public Outreach. I attended the Hopkinton 2+ hour public outreach. I'm very well versed in the IMA, and I just do think that this is the best decision for Grafton moving forward because of all of that time I've invested to understand everything that goes into it.
Roger Trahan, thanks for having this meeting tonight. I do have a question, and just for a point of information to prior comment regarding intermunicipal agreements, Mr. Brassic, I think the 6A rule regarding the select board simply piggybacks under Chapter 40, Section 4A, that all intermunicipal agreements are now in the purview of the select boards. The state legislature was so kind to pull that from town meeting back in 2008. So no matter what the intermunicipal agreement is, it's up to you folks, just so the public knows. So the idea of town meeting, it would only be a sensitive meeting vote if it ever went to town meeting. The question I had, a couple, was that, unless I'm mistaken, is there the need for a new communications tower? And regarding the facility, either a new or refurbished facility between tower communications and to make the building be usable for its intended purpose, how much is that bill going to be? What's the expected cost, and how much will the state incur?
Zero idea. So we're not at that part yet.
Okay.
So and it's a great question. So timeline-wise, we got to put in our grant by March 2nd. And typically what the state is going to fund at that time is going to be enough for us to hire someone that would manage this whole thing and do a study as far as what it would take to make the site that we have selected feasible. So again, just going back to my past experience, we did this exact process, found a site. The site was about $1 million and like $1.25 million. It's actually a former strip club that was only open for a day. So it's pretty interesting, the interior of that and the amount of change there. After it was just to digress for a second.
Well, right?
What's that? Yeah. So it was a strip club that only opened for a day and then closed, and then it was a college, and then now it was bought by Westcom Regional Dispatch. We bought that for $1.25 million, and top of mind, it was between $1.5 and say $1.75 million to refurbish the inside, and the state funded the entire project.
Okay.
But I don't know what, I couldn't even fathom a guess what it costs to do this project on the site that we have.
So you're saying that this is a committee that is going to be put together after the fact of a vote, if there is in fact a vote at some point?
No, so this vote of the board is simply to join the IMA, right? And say, yep, we want to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
After that makes you eligible for the 911 grant.
Okay.
And then that's when you get the money, because these studies and plans and architect's drawings and all that is expensive.
Right.
So we want to get the grant for that rather than have the towns pay for it directly.
So as far as I understand that there's two committees, and one's a finance advisory subcommittee. Unless I'm mistaken in the way I read this, that the appointed committee under the executive director, can this committee bind the respective towns to the debt? And that debt can be incurred outside of town meeting voting on incurring that debt?
So we're actually adding language into the IMA, and this is still a draft document. This is part of what we discussed the other day. That there will be language in there about bonding and the number of town meeting votes that are required in order for us to incur debt beyond what the state will give us.
Okay.
So, for example, the state can say to the district, hey district, borrow some money and we'll pay the note every single year. So those are two separate agreements, but they don't require town meeting vote because the town's not incurring any of that debt. The district is in a deal with the state. If we wanted to go outside of that, let's say the state was only going to give us $1 million and we wanted to spend $2 million, and each town's got to come up with $250,000 and we're going to bond it, yada, yada, yada. Then the contract language here would give us the provision to go to town meeting to get that.
All right, so your language...
There's one other caveat though.
Okay, sure.
Because this is government and we have to make it as confusing as possible. There is a section, I'm going to forget the state law, which is 59 section 23. And basically what chapter 59 section 23 says is that the assessor shall raise enough in taxes to cover the debts of the community. So what that does when you have an IMA is if you owe $250,000 on your IMA and the town votes no, the assessor can still raise that and fund that IMA because that's your legal obligation that you've already entered into. It's the same thing with like a court case, right? The town doesn't like that you settled the court case, you still got to pay.
So the select board and other, or the committees would basically preempt the town meeting vote. In other words, it couldn't not pay its, in other words, we have to pay our bills.
You can't now on a whole bunch of other things, right?
Right,
So
right.
you can't just say, You know what, we made One Grafton Common accessible. We owe $3 million. You know what? Yeah, we paid 1.7 on that. I'm kind of done with that now. We don't have to do that anymore. You can vote no all you want. The town's still obligated to pay that money.
Right, and so I know it's kind of a rubber stamp. The other question I had though is, and it had to do with the operating budget year over year. I agree with Mr. Mead about the looking back at my town reports on the PAC rat, it goes back to 2000. Except for this recent increase in officers, there hadn't been an increase since in 20 years. We were still going at like 18, 19, 20.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that there will be actual savings to add to that. What are you, 26, Chief?
Excuse me?
Are you at 26 officers now, or 24?
23.
23. To maybe get up to that 27 or even 30, that the savings would be incurred. Now, along the lines of savings being incurred, okay, so there's an annual assessment that comes in, we pay it. And if there's an overage, and hopefully the finance committee, meaning the dispatch finance committee would say, well, we only need so much for the following year. But not, am I understanding correct that they would not need to turn back overage in the same way that departments turn back certified free cash?
Yep, because it's its own district. So certified free cash doesn't matter. We're paying an assessment into the district. That money is now the district's money.
And I hate that idea if there's too much overage. We as the checks and balances and the oversight.
So you have a governance board that represents your town. But the other thing that happens is, let's say you had a surplus of $50,000. That $50,000 can then be put towards capital expense, debt, any of those things. So you don't really, honestly, I know it sounds counterintuitive, you don't want that money coming back to the taxpayer in the town. You want it to stay in the district. That's what that assessment is for. And you're trying to fund this mini municipality to create a system that works and benefits all those towns that are.
So that subcommittee would be its own CIPC, Capital Improvement Planning Committee. It wouldn't have the input from our own CIPC, correct?
They don't have any input from any of that. So that you have a governance board.
Right.
That's the town managers. We're representing your capital, your budget process, all of the rest of it. That's our job. So that's your oversight, because we oversee the entire thing. The executive director works for us. That's your check and balance.
Okay. In these four towns, including us, so we're looking at Northborough, Westborough, Hopkinton, have either of these three towns already voted yay or nay on this?
I don't believe so. They're all slated for either February 7th or February 14th.
Mm-hmm. And when did you come up with these four towns? In other words, it's sort of been juggling act, the four towns, the finalization of the four towns that...
So we've always been together, the four of us.
Mm-hmm.
We just had three other ones that decided not to go.
Okay. And another question I had is, so the preamble of this document mentions accepting general law 6A, 18P through 18B.
Yep.
Immediately prior to 18P, as the alphabet would logically have, is 18O. Now,
Yep.
18O speaks of when two or more municipalities, can get together, and then by vote, in this instance, would be the select board, consisting of 3 unpaid persons appointed by the select board chair. You'd have the sole appointing authority in Grafton, Madam Chair. In that it would form a subcommittee, and it would basically be a feasibility committee.
Yep.
Okay. So has that been done? And if not, it would seem like we'd be putting the cart before the horse to not have a regional feasibility committee.
Yeah, so the way that plays out is you get the grant, and then you do all the rest of it. That's what 911 has been making all of us do.
So there wouldn't be a subcommittee?
There would be, but we're going to see if we get the money first.
All right, so if you get the money, it would be a subcommittee in a way that is advertised in 18O.
Yep.
Okay, so I was thinking that 18O was being ignored, and so.
That wasn't, unless the state's doing, I did this last in 2018, so unless the state's doing something different now, I don't think so.
Okay. and no risk of losing mutual aid, you said, which is excellent. And so we're on the hook for the first 5 years, and then it's an automatic renewal for 10-year periods thereafter?
Correct.
All right. And that's all she wrote. All right, thank you. Thanks, Roger.
So I just want to add that we do have a hard stop at 8:30, so there's about 10 more minutes left for any questions you may have.
Taylor Jonkis, Crosby Road. I have some concerns or questions with this, some of which I know may not be able to be answered today. The first one is the dark station. I just think it's a terrible idea. There is no true replacement to having someone in the station.
Yep.
My first question is, if down the road we decide this backfired, how hard is it going to be for us to put our own dispatch back in?
So I would say, let's take the second question first. How hard? Vary. I mean, it is. So we'd have outdated technology in there. You'd have to update all of that. You'd have to get 911 back in there. You've got to staff it. You know, it'd be a project, right? It's not easy to do. And the other thing, the dark station, I want to just point out, like, you know, very clear that that's one of the downsides of this, right? No one thinks that it's better to have a dark station than have a station with people in it. I think there are ways to utilize technology and, you know, some administrative staffing to alleviate some of that, but you'll never alleviate all of it. The only example I'll give you that I thought was a positive is, in my previous community, you know, we designed our lobby. Our lobby had, like I said, the call button. Most of the time people came in, pushed the button, said, I need to apply for an LTC, I need to do blah, 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 whatever it is. There's all these forms on the left, you do the forms, you put them in the mailbox, and you're done. You know, we also had the provision that you could come in and say, you know, my husband's after me, my wife's after me, whatever your current situation is. The dispatcher can push a button and unlocks the door, and now you're on the other side of the wall there. We did have one situation right before I left that was, I think, a positive. So in that community, small community, they have 2 paramedics on a shift overnight. If you went to the fire department previously, you could bang on the door all you want. They're sleeping or they're in the bay and they don't hear you. But what we were able to do is add a call box there with a camera. And we actually had a daughter pull into the station with her father in the car who was having a heart attack. I don't remember the specifics of why she was driving him around, or if he had it in the car or whatever. But they were able to push the button, get the dispatchers, and actually it's interesting because they pushed the button, it called Chicopee, Chicopee dispatched over the radio, woke the paramedics up, they got in the ambulance, pulled right outside the bay, loaded them up, and away they went. And that was something we wouldn't have had the technology to do, and it's something that's an option here in Grafton too, is add that level of technology. Still, I agree, not as good as having a person sitting in there or having both of those things. But it's kind of a is what it is situation that we're trying to, you know, figure out the best way to navigate.
Okay. The next part is I question whether the savings long-term will be as cut and dry as it appears on paper today. Another concern I have is the fact that 10 towns attended the first meeting, 6 of which at one point or another for some reason said, no thanks, we're all set, we're going to stick with what we had. The other big difference between Grafton and these other 3 towns is in regards to the fire department. Westboro, Hopkinton, and Southboro run all full-time departments out of 1 station. Grafton runs a full paid-on-call department out of 3 stations with their respective response districts, depending on the severity of the incident. The second phase to that is Westboro, Hopkinton, and Southboro's fire departments all provide EMS to those towns. Grafton's using a private EMS on a tri-town with Millbury and Sutton. So that being said, those 2 pieces to this, I question what challenges will arise from these 2 things.
Right. Yep, and so I think the chief talked a little bit about run cards, there's SOPs, and, you know, don't mistake that this is a presentation of all butterflies and rainbows. There's going to be challenges. When I went through this process before, there were challenges that I never would have thought of. And, you know, we had to work collectively to figure it out. The difference, I think, today is that there's many more wrecks than the wreck that I set up or went into. And, you know, there's a lot of other knowledge to pull from. because they are doing it elsewhere, and what works and what doesn't work is rapidly being established other places.
Thank you.
Sure.
Can I just add to the dark station too? While we're planning right now to have, possibly a few unmanned hours, the IMA does provide the flexibility where Grafton could put someone in there 24/7. And so if it ends up being something where the town isn't satisfied with how it's being handled, we do have the ability to have someone in there. So, just wanted to add that.
Danielle Decker, 24 Gillette. I'm just curious, the time frame, like how long will this, obviously after we get the grant, or assuming we get the grant,
Yeah.
what the time frame is?
Sure, so it depends on who you ask. I think it's 24 months. The chief thinks it's longer than 24 months.
That 3 years free, does that?
It starts
day
when we
one?
open the doors of the rec.
Okay.
Yep, it's based on your assessment. So, we're government. Everything takes a long time. And we're also working collaboratively with the state government, which also takes a long time. So I don't see it being within 24 months personally.
And then if we were to sign and get the grant, what repercussions would there be if, for some reason, we realized we made the wrong decision?
So there are repercussions that are laid out. In practicality, probably nothing, honestly. Can you bring up the other map? Here, I'll just show you something quick, and I know we're coming up to our deadline. So this is the town of Munson, and that's where I live currently, if anybody's asked. So this is Westcom Regional Dispatch. This is Chicopee, Longmeadow, East Longmeadow, Munson, and now Ware. Ware wasn't part of it originally, but they joined up after I left. East Longmeadow was, and they're all my friends, I'm not trashing them, but they were in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out the whole time. It was very hard to figure out if they were going to remain. They were part of the original grant process and then backed out. And it still irritates them to this day that we slid in and took their slot, and then they came in after and they were down the list from our needs. But what's interesting about the state of Massachusetts and the way it's regionalizing, and I can go into a whole diatribe about this, is see these two towns, Wilbraham and Hampton? They're their own regional dispatch. They were allowed to form after we formed this. So now you have a district with these two towns in between here. They're also socioeconomically much more wealthy than the surrounding communities. But anyways, so I think that if we get the grant, you go down the rabbit hole and say, this isn't for us, there's opportunities for us to hit the brakes and bail out. And I don't...
But there's no set, financial penalty?
No, because the state doesn't have any financial penalty for you accepting grant money as part of a regional operation. And then, they're not going to say, there's nothing that I've ever seen that says, here's $500,000 to do your district study. Oh, Grafton, you bailed out, you owe us $100,000. Doesn't work that way. Okay. Carl?
Just curious, were any other sites considered besides the one that's currently being proposed?
There's one in Hopkinton that we decided was not suitable, or was part of the conversation was that it's not suitable. One thing that's interesting, so when you're putting together this grant, there's a whole bunch of boxes that you want to check to put yourself up higher and higher in the grant award process. One of those is selecting a site. So there's I'd say a slim possibility that we could apply for the grant with the Westboro site, figure out that it's not suitable through our process, and then select a different site. So.
Because that's my concern, is the cost, if the cleanup and all that ends up being like something astronomical.
Oh, yeah. So, and I'm, unfortunately, Bill's here with a camera, but I'll tell you something. So a big part of my job, Bill, pointed at the door. No, I'm just a big part of my job is to take those dollars that you give to the state and make them benefit Grafton, right? And so I'm not saying I don't care what it costs to clean it up, but if we don't get those dollars and say clean up the site and build a rec, those dollars are in Framingham. Those dollars are in some other town. And so if you look at Westboro and we go through the process and it is suitable, and the state says, yep, we'll pay for it, we're gonna go ahead. Because that's still gonna benefit the Grafton taxpayer.
Westboro did have a second site that they had the state 911 come out and look at, and state 911 came out and looked at the current site that they're considering as well. They didn't give a full green light, but they said that this would be a suitable site, so it lowers the concern on that.
Quick question, Upton, were they included, did we talk to Upton at all?
They have their own, they're in a regional with
They're on that big
Hopedale.
red block on the other side?
Upton's already regionalized with Hopedale, and I think it's my understanding that's all they're gonna take into that PSAP, right?
Right now, yeah,
Yeah.
they haven't offered, they don't have the capability.
So
to take
we
it out.
were approached by state 911 with those other communities to see if we wanted to form a dispatch, because I think that they're looking for towns that can put together something with capacity to take other communities.
Do we have any sites in Grafton that we put up that were, not at all?
None that seemed suitable when we were going through this process. There's a couple that I have my eyes on, but they're privately owned and have tenants in them, so that's probably not gonna
What
work
about the
out.
front of Wyman Gordon? What happened to that? They're out of there, right?
No, they're in land court,
Oh, really quick.
so I couldn't tell you when that is gonna resolve, but, yeah, no, that was kind of the process. They had a site and it seemed reasonable.
Yeah.
Danielle?
Can I suggest
Sure.
that I think we take for granted how it all works and don't really know, that nobody's got to drive from Southborough to Grafton. I think it would be helpful to maybe
Yeah, I
put
think people
together
are mixing up
an
dispatch and
explanation on how,
coverage areas.
right, dispatch works, how it's going to work with the fire, the fire stations and the ambulance and.
Yeah. So you would suggest that we do a, okay, I didn't know if you.
Well, you get bored with your
I
presentation.
didn't know if you had a thought. I mean, we can certainly do something. The chief loves being on camera down at GCTV, maybe you can do an info session. I don't know, something like that.
But is that like clarifying dispatch versus mutual aid? Is that what you're looking for?
I think so,
Okay.
and how it all works together, how,
That equipment stays in Grafton,
Right.
it's not coming, it's not all gonna be coming from Westboro.
Right, that
That's
it's
the
just
central spot.
the
Is this like hand
dispatch
raising?
phone call or,
Yeah.
We still go to, okay.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, absolutely.
So I just want to say the gentleman that stood up and talked about like the lack of communication is right. I am a simple townie. I would rather eat some good food and go boating than listen to your meetings, with all due respect. But I just want to say, like, when you have things coming up like police station and trigger words, you can almost say, like, there needs to be some real clear explanation of what's happening, because I did also hear about this today. And when I saw it, I had this initial, oh my God, reaction. So, and then as I'm sitting here listening to all of this, it makes sense and it's logical. I'm glad I came. So my only suggestion is, like, we're coming up with suggestions here, is that there needs to be real clear communication leading up to it.
Okay.
And I mean, anything that you're talking about, like a house being built, who cares? But this stuff is big.
I guarantee you there's people that care, because I.
Well, I do, I care.
No, fair point, sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's my only
Do you
point.
have any suggestions? Like in.
Really, God, no.
Like where do you get your information?
Yeah, because I think
there's
that's
supposed to be a
question,
question,
is like where?
Yeah, so what are the suggestions?
You guys need to start bringing sangria to your meetings. That's where you need to pique people's interests.
I think,
I don't know how.
I think Anne Marie had a great idea about the billboard out in front of Town Hall or
Right.
at the center, somehow like Westboro and multiple other towns.
Yep.
I mean, I run a group, I only have 1,000 people in the group in town, but literally, and we scour the website daily. And we still only found out about this 2 days ago, so.
Just found out today.
Where did you find out about it?
Posted it.
I posted it. I'm Debbie Perrin,
Yep.
and Dennis and I posted it. And I had some really great conversations with Andy after. But let's face it, and I knew Eileen Gately to go to her house, okay? So I'm there. I'm a lifelong townie. My dad was chief of police. So, look, you need to communicate with people. I'm sorry. Look, I'm not giving you, I'm not telling you what to do. I really don't care. But if you have a job to do it. But let the people in this town know, because you know what's going to happen? There are going to be people like me that are going to put it all over Facebook so that you're going to start getting all sorts of questions asked. You might as well do it beforehand and tell the taxpayers what they need to hear. It was almost like, especially that little second part of your agenda saying, may vote on this?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, really. 'cause
When
you
no
have to have
one,
it
no,
on.
wait a minute, when no one obviously
Yeah.
knew about it, okay?
So-
90% of this town did not know about this. Am I right? Yeah, okay.
So,
So, how can you do that to us? How can you all just think that since you have that vote, you can just do it? You can't.
Okay.
And this is the repercussion. So please, think about what you're doing
Yeah.
beforehand. Think about those people that are paying taxes.
So, Kelly, can I?
Really, you didn't. You didn't, we missed it. You missed the vote.
Okay,
Well,
so I.
honestly, they could do it without any of our input, right?
Right.
But
So,
So
there's that.
I want to go back. So I've done this literally 3 times, this exact thing.
Hold on, let Evan.
It's been in the Grafton News. It's been on every select board agenda. Seriously, go back and read the agendas. Grafton News, or Grafton Commons, sorry, whatever. Yeah, Grafton News, right. But it did in August when they had the article that showed up.
The Grafton News has reduced itself to
Right.
a couple pages.
Right.
We are actually, from the Grafton Group, about to put out a weekly mailer with
Mhm.
information, just solely information, no news stories. We're gonna try to get input from every group in town, ask politicians, ask the TA,
Yep.
and actually bring attention, because we have tried to do that with the Facebook group and bring up a lot of attention.
Yeah.
But I think in this town especially, people want something on paper. They want something that they can see, that they can look up. The website is extremely hard to navigate right at the moment
Okay.
for people to find information, even with the announcement. And we operate it every single day. I have a lot of things that, we try to post, but I feel like the information's not getting out there. So we're just gonna put out an informational every week and hope to get more people engaged, so we don't have meetings like this where everyone's shocked that I've watched the other 2 meetings, so I'm not shocked of what's going on. I mean, I've done my research on regional dispatch. I have an opinion, I haven't really stated it, just because I want to just put the information out and let people talk.
Right. Yep.
But we do have kind of an information block. I mean, Grafton Common, she stopped doing it and went, and she's running a paper in Concord or whatever she's doing. The
Yeah.
Grafton News is literally 1 to 2 pages long and it
Yep.
doesn't really contain anything. So I think a weekly informational, I think the billboard out in front of Town Hall, I don't know how else besides the website and Facebook that you actually are going to be able to reach all these people.
Yep.
To bring it to people's attention.
The
So,
proof is in the pudding where no one shows up.
yeah,
Every time the same answers are given and people do not show up. Is there 100% of this town at anything?
No, and that's just,
So I can
That's
speak
never-
for myself.
it's like a really Deb to you. I was not prepared, if I just got a document today, I was certainly not going to vote on anything today. I think that, I won't speak for the rest of the board, but we all are vetting all of these things. I am vetting everything that we talk about at every single board meeting. How do we get that to you? That's part of what I ran on, actually, is trying to engage more folks, and how do we get the information out? We don't have our Grafton News anymore, which 20-plus years ago, really, little did we realize, right, how much we missed KY Not and whatnot. So here we are. So until we get another publication like that we can hope that goes to a number of people. We do have a Grafton News, which you guys are publishing things in. There is the website. We all have email addresses. Most of us also have a Facebook presence. Not that Facebook is
JCTV.
by
Bill?
JCTV, of
Could
course,
you
is
not
in
do
there.
that?
But
Would you
actually,
change all that?
I will
If we
also
could-
say,
if we could hear
I would
some of those
encourage you to
meetings, it would be
even just go to
awesome.
minutes, because I know we talked about the video,
Yeah.
and I know for
Can't hear
me,
a word.
realistically, to watch a 2-hour, meeting is not, we all work and do different things, but hopefully minutes are up to date. You can always go to the minutes. If you have questions there, bring it to the either town administrator's office or us personally. But I will say that
I appreciate that it's hard getting the information out, and when you're sitting here, you're like, wait, what? You didn't know about this? But
Could you do a flyer and leave it at the library?
on what though? Like on, different?
On a subject like this?
Yeah.
You know, could you have put out a flyer, this is the details, something like this, and leave it at the library for people to pick up?
I mean, I almost feel like every week there's something that we
Right, last week it
talk
was the
about.
Grafton Up and
Yeah.
Railroad, and there was a whole
Yeah.
room of people that had their concerns about that, and they're not here tonight. It's this group of people, there's always gonna be a group of people. And if you wanna reach more people, and you do post a group like yours, making it public so more people can see it, that's another avenue you could do, because yours is private right now. So you only reach the people in it. If you
Right.
wanna reach more people, you gotta make it public.
Yeah, public groups on Facebook are out of control right
But-
now.
but that's-
Unfortunately,
but I know, but
I
that's
have
a difficult-
2,700 people from India or something in there. If I made it a public group, I can't.
But
They
So-
spam the groups,
I'll just say,
unfortunately.
thank you, everybody, for coming out, whatever side you're on, or just to get the information. I mean, it was useful for me, even, I'm still making my decision. I reached out to some career fire department folks, career police department folks months ago to talk about this, that don't work in our town, by the way, trying to get information from Evan and listening to what's going on here. I'm glad that the chief spoke a little bit more to it today. I do appreciate Taylor's comments back there as well. So I think that, this is very valuable, and thanks everyone for coming out, and we'll continue to do our best, I suppose, to get information, but watch the meetings or come to the meetings if you want. No sangria, sorry.
We can bring a
That's my
sangria.
2 cents.
All right, so I can take a motion to adjourn.
Nobody knows what's
Motion
in there.
made and seconded, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed, declare the motion